Greetings to those who watch below. Today we are dealing with one of my favourite paranormal topics, inhuman entities. But before we start, I'd like to say thank you to Steffi Ray, Lefty Kim, M.A. Way, Julie B, Chris BLK Chris, Canopsia, Tegan S, Tezos Karamaris, LT Punisher 666, Wicked Witch, and Lisa Watts for being those who dwell below, an exclusive channel membership that gets you shoutouts at the start of every single video. As well as on YouTube, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. You can find the details for those in the description box as well. But for now, sit back, relax and enjoy. What Did I Encounter? By Fungi Desperate. I live in upstate New York, near a relatively high-traffic hiking trail that runs alongside a stream for a portion. Last week, I noticed a dead deer near the stream, pretty common in our area, especially in winter. I went for a walk yesterday evening and I passed where the deer was, and saw something that's been really messing with me since. Something was crouched over the dead deer. It looked like a pig, but was large, the size of a grown man, with loose, sagging skin. Its whole face was kind of sagging and leaking out of its nose and eyes. I've worked with livestock before, so I know what pigs look like, and this pig was all the wrong shape. Its body was swollen and its back legs were splayed out, so I could see that they were really long. I could see that it had virtually no hair, just smooth skin. It was sitting on its back haunches near the deer, and by the time I got close enough to see, it was staring at me, totally still. I have this sick certainty that it noticed me way before I noticed it. I was standing like 20 foot away, still basically on the trail, and it was just staring at me. The deer carcass was kind of everywhere, like it had been messily eaten, and while I was watching the pig, it raised both its front legs, and I saw that they ended not in cleft feet, but in large hands, like human hands. It reached into the deer and just ripped a chunk off of its side, raised it to its snout and ate out of its hands. All this went down in a matter of seconds, and as soon as I saw its hands, I just turned back the way I came on the trail and walked away as fast as I could. I wanted to run, but I was afraid it would chase me, so I went back to where I came in, just trying to stay calm. It was the worst walk of my life. I was afraid to look behind me because I was so scared I would see the pig following me on his hands, but I made it out and ran across the parking lot to my car. Now I'm just trying to understand this encounter. I want to believe my mind was playing tricks on me. I haven't found anything on the internet about this creature. Strange Man Met While Hiking by Vit J.O. I had this encounter about a year ago, but I started thinking about it quite recently. I decided to go on a solo hiking trip for about 2 weeks. This would have been my second time doing something like this. The first 2 days of the hike were very average and relaxing, just a simple hike. But at night, things got a little bit weird. I went to sleep about 9 or 10 o'clock, and nothing much happened until about 2 a.m. I remember smelling a faint stench of rotting meat. It wasn't anything too crazy, but it was weird enough to somewhat wake me up. I tried to ignore it and go back to sleep, but then I started to notice that something was moving around my tent. I did think that because of the smell and the sounds that it could be some carnivorous animal that maybe stank of rotting meat for whatever reason. But since I was still half asleep, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't a bear or something, so I opened my eyes to check around. Now, just to note that during that night the moon was quite bright, so it was possible to see quite well outside. So when I opened my eyes, I could see a vague, lanky humanoid shadow outside my tent. I didn't feel like I was in danger or anything. I did have a sidearm with me, so even if it was some creep, I didn't really feel threatened while holding a gun. After about a minute, the guy left, and the smell also disappeared. But since it was a very creepy encounter, I decided to stay awake for about an hour, and after nothing else happened, I went back to bed. The next day, I had that weird feeling of being watched by something dangerous, but I didn't know if it was because I was confident in my ability to protect myself or whatever, but I didn't feel like I was in any danger at all. I just felt creeped out. I didn't really enjoy that day all that much, to be fully honest, and because of that, I set up camp a lot faster than I usually did. But I didn't go to bed at my normal time, since I didn't want someone sneaking up on me again. At around 1 a.m, I could smell that weird smell again, so I gripped my gun a little tighter and tried to find the guy. But instead, all I saw were just a pair of yellowish eyes in the distance. I stared at them for about 5 minutes, and then they just vanished, together with the smell. I didn't feel like I was being watched anymore during that night, so after another hour, I decided to go to sleep. The next day, the feeling of being watched was back, but again, I didn't feel as though I was in any danger at all. But I decided that even though I felt that way, I would still rather cut this trip short instead of actually getting into a situation where I was in danger. So I started making my way back. Nothing really happened that night. The next day, I could suddenly smell that rotten stench. It wasn't any stronger than before, but since I was in a decently large clearing at that time and didn't see anything or anyone around me, I did panic a bit and started walking with a faster pace. I'm not exactly sure on how long I walked after that, but around midday the stench got stronger. I think that it's important to note that I don't have the best vision and should wear glasses, but I don't most of the time. So when I looked around, I saw a grey humanoid figure quite far away to my left, and I did panic, but by the time I had actually put my glasses on, it was gone. After that, I really didn't feel like staying there for much longer, so I started doing a slow run to get out of there faster. I had run quite a distance while feeling something following me, but then I ran into this strangely peaceful clearing where both the stench and the feeling of being watched stopped. It was a relatively small clearing with a few small boulders around. But the strange thing was that a man who was in his late 40s or maybe even early 50s was sitting on one of the boulders. He was wearing very plain dad clothes, definitely not something you would be wearing while hiking in the middle of nowhere. Plus, he had no gear anywhere near him. But the first thing I noticed about the guy was his strangely bright green eyes. They weren't bright in the literal sense, but more like the brightness you would see in the eyes of a child. After running for so long, I was exhausted, and the man noticed that and told me to sit down on one of the boulders and rest. I didn't even think about it and sat down. We talked for a while, mostly about hiking and nature, and while talking, he had this very friendly smile that made me feel at ease. When I had rested, he offered to help me build my campsite in the clearing. He was very good at starting a fire. We shared a cup of tea, and he told me that it was very nice talking to me, but he has to go now. He didn't really say why or where he has to go. He just stood up and left. That night, I didn't hear any noises other than a few birds and crickets. When I woke up the next day, I felt very refreshed. I packed up and started to continue along the trail. I didn't feel like I was being watched or smelled that stench at all during the rest of my hike. Was It The Mothman? By Nest J26. I'm sure many people have heard about the elusive Mothman, especially after the film The Mothman Prophecies. If not, the Mothman was a very tall, 5 to 8 feet, humanoid-type creature with bright red glowing eyes and large wings for which it could use to fly. It was most famous in the town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where it was spotted the most. Well, the town where I grew up and all of my family still resides was a small town in Ohio maybe 20 minutes or so out of Wheeling, West Virginia. I was talking to my dad on the phone just 2 nights ago and was telling him about my experience with some ghostly footprints, and he asked me if he had told me about the thing he saw last week while driving home from work. He then began to tell me what he had seen. My dad works the night shift for a coal mine in Monroe County, Ohio. While he was driving home from work early one morning between 4 and 5 a.m, he noticed in the road this large creature crouched down with bright red glowing eyes that looked directly at him. He said this creature also had very large wings, which were also kind of wrapped around it as it crouched in the middle of the road. He said as long as he had lived, he had never in his life seen anything like this, and to be honest, it actually creeped him out. He proceeded to drive by it, and he looked behind him to see where it was at, and it was gone. He said that he was actually scared to get out of his car when he got home, in fear that perhaps it had followed him, or was even on his car. Luckily it wasn't, and he hasn't seen it since then. My dad had never heard of the Mothman, nor had he even seen the movie. He said that everybody had described what he had seen to right away said, "It sounds like you saw the Mothman." You hear stories like this all the time, and because you don't really know the person who witnessed it, whether you want to believe it or not, there is still a part of you that questions whether or not it is true. Knowing my dad and what a logical thinker he is usually the one to come up with logical excuses for things that are otherwise unexplainable. He is very skeptical about things like aliens, UFOs, ghosts, etc. And for me to talk to him and hear him tell me about this Mothman-like creature was very shocking for me, for this is not like my father. There isn't a doubt in my mind that what he saw was 100% true. It has completely made a believer out of me when it comes to the Mothman. I will say that I am a little worried, for what I understand is that when people actually see the Mothman, often something very bad happens afterwards. I've done some research on this, and whether or not the fact is true about the Mothman, my findings are inconclusive. I hope, of course, for the sake of my father and my family, that it isn't true. There's something nasty and inhuman within that bathroom's walls, and it's not human waste. I'm sharing a paranormal encounter I had in 2014 at a good friend's condo. My friend Becky would allow me to use her washer and dryer because I hated going to the laundromat. The only downside to this situation was that the washer and dryer were tiny, so it usually took me all night to do a week's worth of laundry for 2 people. So one night I was over there and had to shower because I was all sweaty from the gym. I started the laundry and proceeded to shower in the bathroom that was about 5 feet away from the washer and dryer closet and wasn't inside the bathroom. I immediately felt uneasy as soon as I stepped into the shower. It felt like some perv was watching me. I rushed to finish showering, and as I was rinsing my hair out, I heard what sounded like a huge, disgusting exhale of breath in my left ear. I could immediately feel the breath, and it was ice cold, which didn't make sense since the shower was pretty hot. Immediately, it was followed by the sound of someone smacking their lips in my right ear. Needless to say, I got the fuck out of that bathroom. But I shook it off and just told myself I was being paranoid since it was pretty late and I was tired. Plus, I had to do my laundry, so I didn't want to leave. Fast forward to about 2:30 a.m. I drifted off while watching TV, but was still waiting for the wash cycle to finish. I was woken up to what can only be described as maniacal laughter coming from the same bathroom I had showered in earlier. I thought maybe Becky or her boyfriend was playing a joke on me, so I ran back there and was about ready to throw a cup of water in their faces, but nobody was there. I called out to my friends but didn't get a response as they were sleeping an entire floor above where I was at. I brushed it off again and thought maybe I was dreaming, although I felt in my heart that that wasn't the case. By the time the wash cycle was done, I had to put my clothes in the dryer, so again I sat back down on the couch and watched some TV while I waited. About 25 minutes later, I had to pee, and even though I really didn't want to go into that bathroom, I didn't really have a choice, since the only other toilet was in Becky's bedroom, and I didn't want to wake her or her boyfriend. I sucked it up and went into the bathroom. I was able to do my business without incident and was washing my hands when I heard a sickly groan in my ear, followed by a tingling sensation that seemed to rush into my body through my neck, and I could feel it throughout my entire body almost instantaneously. Initially, I was frozen in fear and afraid to move. When some of the tingling sensation went away, I was able to lift my head. But when I did, I saw what was behind me in the mirror's reflection. It was a tall, dark, humanoid figure with talon-like hands, and one of those talons was poking my neck, which is where the tingling sensation seemed to originate from. I heard one last disgusting groan, and it was gone. I hauled ass out of that house without my clothes. The next day, I called Becky to apologise and explain what had happened. She wasn't surprised in the least. She said she had an almost identical experience just a few days before mine. Becky is a witch, and she was messing around with this creepy book around the time the activity started, so I can only assume that was what brought that thing into her home. We tried cleansing the home with sage, sweetgrass, prayers, crystals, holy water, and blessed oil. No matter what we tried, it never seemed to last more than a few days. The weird thing is that the activity was almost exclusively in that bathroom. Another girlfriend of ours came over one day only to scream this blood-curdling scream when we stepped into the bathroom. She said she saw something, but she never elaborated or came back to that condo. She had no idea that we had experiences of our own in there prior to hers. All three of us who'd experienced something in that bathroom went on to have close to 2 years of bad luck. Becky lost the condo within months of my initial experience. Hi there guys, thank you so much for listening to today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe to the channel, hitting that notification bell so that you never miss a video. Have you ever had an encounter with an inhuman entity? If so, I'd love to hear your story. So, until next time, sleep tight.